All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There are a lot of questions in this Jeopardy, and I also have some tutoring that's going on with my bio kids right after. All right. So you don't need to raise your hands or anything, but of course, anytime throughout the meeting, if you do have questions, just simply unmute yourself and ask away. All right, you guys, I'm going to keep this participant list up so I can see if people pop into the waiting room. And here we go. We'll do one category at a time. All right, here we go. The largest watershed in North America drains into the sea at which location? And because we have so many questions to get through, the 100-point questions, I'm going to be giving 30 seconds before I reveal the answer. The 200-point questions, I'll be giving you about a minute. The 300-point questions, about 2 minutes. And the 400-point questions, about 3 minutes. All right, here we go. Okay, it drains into New Orleans, and of course we are talking about the Mississippi River. The water diversion project on the Kissimmee River in Florida is currently undergoing blank. The removal of large particles from wastewater is referred to as blank. All right, here we go. All right, so it's undergoing restoration, Kissimmee River. Let's see, beg your pardon, give me a second. Primary water treatment is the removal of large particles. And remember, they use screens and grates to do that. And they also use some chemicals that it's called flocculation to make that happen. All right, here we go. Okay, where is the This sounds very familiar. The Ogallala Aquifer. The greatest use of water in the United States is for the cooling of blank plants and irrigation. Many desalination plants are located in the Middle East because the plants use a lot of what? Can you make sure Logan unlocks the back gate? The guy's coming over. Last guy. About another 60 seconds. Yes, I am recording this. It'll be uploaded to the classroom probably by 4 or 5 this evening. Here we go. So the central high plains of the United States, cooling of electrical plants and irrigation. And the Middle East, of course, has access to a lot of fossil fuels. And the process of desalination is very, very energy intensive. Here we go. You would likely see an increase in BOD, which is biological oxygen demand, downstream because of effluent release from a blank blank treatment facility. True or false? Dams prevent useful sediments from being moved downstream. What could occur when a coastal aquifer is overdrawn? Meaning they take too much of the groundwater out near the coast. Okay, about another 30 seconds. So again, if you know the answers to a lot of these questions already, you're probably pretty prepared. If you think that you would be able to recognize the answer in a multiple choice question, you're probably pretty prepared. If a lot of this is foreign to you, obviously you've got some work to do between now and whenever you take your test. All right, here we go. Okay, so primary sewage. When primary sewage is released, you're going to have a lot of biological oxygen demand. You're probably going to have a good amount of eutrophication, and you're going to have a lot of species, aquatic species, that rely on that oxygen suffering. And true, dams do prevent useful sediments from being moved downstream. And what could occur when a coastal aquifer is overdrawn? You can get saltwater intrusion. Basically, it opens up pore spaces, and the salt water can move into those pore spaces, which of course can destroy aquifers that are used for irrigation, or destroy aquifers that are used for drinking water. All right, here we go. On to resources and waste. Which of the following methods, give me a second. Which of the following methods is or are used to disinfect sewage effluent in municipal systems? Ozone, chlorine, UV light. Is it one of them, or is it many of those, or is it all of those? All right, here we go. It is all of them. Those are all methods that are used in to disinfect sewage effluent. And remember, ozone, chlorine, and UV typically are the tertiary or the third stage of waste treatment. Recycling aluminum from cans in order to make more aluminum cans is an example of what type of recycling? What term describes that? What elemental resource is associated with bauxite? So the mineral name is bauxite. Which element is mined from bauxite? Here we go. So closed loop recycling is when the same product is recycled to make the same product. And aluminum. Aluminum comes from the mineral bauxite. Mountaintop removal is associated with the mining of what resource? Which programs allow polluters to buy and sell the right to pollute? True or false? Fungi using extracellular digestion to break down MTBE, which is a toxic chemical, in groundwater is a legitimate method used to detoxify hazardous waste. All right, about 30 seconds. All right, here we go. Mountaintop removal is for coal. The cap and trade program is where you can buy and sell credits based on your level of polluting. And false. It's bacteria will aid in the extracellular digestion, not fungi. Okay. Using a geologically stable site lined with clay and plastic, using leachate pipes to remove dirty water, and methane wells are all features of a blank landfill. Which country has extensive reserves of manganese, chromium, and platinum? True or false? Increasing the fees for using a landfill will encourage recycling. The land from an abandoned oil refinery, which potentially could have another use, is an example of what? Remember, if you guys have specific questions, just unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you. All right, you guys, about 20 seconds. Here we go. So it's a sanitary landfill. South Africa has large reserves of manganese, chromium, and platinum. True, increasing the fees for landfill will encourage recycling. And a brownfield, the land from abandoned oil refinery, which potentially could have another use, is a brownfield. So something that was damaged or used in the past, but has potential future use. All right, here we go. On to agriculture and soil. Agroforestry, a sustainable agricultural method, can be used to control blank and to decrease blank. All right, here we go. All right, so they can control pests and decrease insects. Pardon me. Pests or insects can be controlled by agroforestry, and it can decrease erosion, which is the movement of sediment on the Earth's surface. All right. If a soil sample has 32% sand, 33% silt, and 35% clay, how would the soil be categorized? True or false? Converting land used for cattle grazing to cropland would be a sustainable way of dealing with the expanding human population. And basically, just as long as you know how to use the soil triangle, you will be fine for that question on the test. All right, here we go. All right, so that's a clay loam. And true, converting land used for cattle grazing to cropland would be a sustainable way of dealing with the expanding human population. Because remember, we're going to need to feed more people. And also remember, cattle grazing is one of the most inefficient uses of land. And additionally, cattle produce a ton of methane, which is damaging the climate. Which of the following would be most damaging to the environment as a pesticide? Bacillus thuringiensis, insecticidal soap, lindane, brachynoid, a parasitic wasp, or rotenone. True or false? Oysters are a commonly cultivated aquaculture crop. Which of the following agricultural practices do not decrease soil erosion? Shelter beds, cover crops, terracing, conventional tillage, applying mulch. All right, about 20 seconds. All right, here we go. All right, so lindane is the most damaging to the environment. True, oysters are a commonly cultivated aquaculture crop, and conventional tillage basically means just tilling the land like we've always tilled the land. That is not an agricultural practice that will decrease soil erosion. It actually will increase soil erosion. All right, here we go. Of course, all of the others would decrease erosion. All right, last one for ag and soils. True or false? Clay has a good water holding capacity. If an effective pesticide is consistently sprayed on a crop, explain why insect populations slowly start to increase in number over time. That's kind of counterintuitive. What are the two best soil textures to grow in? If an area's topsoil is 2 meters thick, topsoil forms at a rate of 1.5 centimeters per 100 years. Topsoil erodes at a rate of 3 millimeters per year. Assuming these rates stay constant, how much soil will be present in 200 years? I don't remember if those characteristics were identical to the warm-up question. I might have modified those numbers, but you will have to do something similar to this, if not identical to this. About 30 seconds. Here we go. So it is true. Clay does have good water holding capacity. Let's see. The insects develop resistance, just like the coronavirus currently is. The more they get exposed to a certain type of antibody, there are mutations, and they actually grow and develop a resistance. Two best soils are silt and loam. And the answer to that math problem is 1430 millimeters or 143 centimeters or 1.43 meters. Here we go on to parks, forest, and restoration, and also environmental law. Legislation created and adopted addressing Antarctica, DDT, and other items were an example of legislation at which level? Which geographical level? All right, here we go. What is the global or the international level of legislation? The National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA, requires the development of A, if it's singular, and if it's plural, blank, blank, blank for any large construction project involving the federal government. Filling in wetlands for construction will result in the loss of vegetation and a blank of infiltration of water into aquifers. So that last blank is going to be an increase or a decrease. All right, a couple more seconds. Okay, it's called an environmental impact statement. So any federal project requires an environmental impact statement where science and policy are both involved to decide whether or not it is a good idea. And of course, filling in wetlands for construction will result in the loss of vegetation and a decrease of infiltration of water into aquifers. These things provide watersheds, improve watersheds, beg your pardon, help maintain climate stability, provide places for recreation, and provide wildlife habitat. True or false, the clear cutting experiment demonstrated that there were too many nitrates in stream water. Blank cutting would be a preferred method of biologists for harvesting oak trees for furniture. All right, here we go. So forests improve watersheds, maintain climate stability, provide places for recreation, and provide for wildlife habitat. True, clear cutting experiment did indicate that there were more nitrates, and that's because soils contain nitrates, and those soils were eroding down into the stream. And selective cutting would be a preferred method for biologists harvesting oak trees for furniture. Okay, a blank blank is a binding agreement preserving land from development in exchange for tax write offs. That sounds kind of familiar. True or false? The Price Anderson Act applies to draining a wetland in Florida containing numerous waterfowl. What legislation forces companies to reclaim land disturbed by mining of coal? That also sounds familiar. If a developer wants to fill in a marsh and agrees to create new marshland, this is an example of what? About one more minute. All right, here we go. Okay, a conservation easement is a binding agreement preserving land from development in exchange for tax write offs. False. The Price Anderson Act is not involved in draining a wetland. SMCRA, that was a recent warm up question, is the legislation that forces companies to reclaim land disturbed by the mining of coal. And mitigation is when a developer wants to fill in a marsh and agrees to create new marsh land. Okay, here we go. Urban environments and random questions. Blank percent of the global population live in cities. Blank percent live in cities in developed nations. And blank percent live in cities in undeveloped nations. This question, if I'm not mistaken, is right out of the notes we did. About 10 seconds. All right, here we go. 45% of the global population live in cities, 75% live in cities in developed nations, and 38% live in cities in undeveloped nations. And again, these are statistics from a dated book, so those numbers are probably higher for all three. Moderate climate, drinkable water, a good substrate bedrock in which to build, and nearby agricultural land and forested land are all characteristics of a good location for what? The fact that urban areas trap more heat than rural ones describes which phenomenon? Well, here we go. All right, so those are good locations for cities in the heat island effect. And that's one of the reasons why downtown during a hot summer day is hotter than the suburbs because there's more concrete, there's less green space, and more heat gets absorbed downtown. And the same is to be said about cities and then towns that are outside of the urban areas. Why are mass transit rail systems useful in cities? Why have them? Burying them deep in the ground in geologically stable areas is a preferred method of disposing of high level what? Or what type of waste? And where is the majority of fresh water found on planet Earth? About one more minute. All right, here we go. All right, so mass transit rail systems are to reduce traffic, automobile traffic, of course. Radioactive or hazardous wastes, high level radioactive or high level hazardous wastes. A good idea is to store them in geologically stable areas. Obviously, if they're not geologically stable and you can have the potential for earthquakes, that's not really a safe place to put them. And the majority of fresh water on the planet is found in rivers and streams. Okay, desertification tends to occur when overgrazing on blank land occurs. True or false? Sport hunting is allowed in national parks. What is likely the biggest benefit of raising genetically modified crops? And blanks are perceived as being dirty and polluted, where residents suffer, and they lack wildlife and plant life, and they're also artificial. What things are described by those perceptions? About 30 seconds. All right, here we go. Okay, so marginal or average land is land that comes from desertification and overgrazing. False. Sport hunting is not allowed in national parks. Let's see. The likely to be the biggest benefit of raising genetically modified crops is you get large yields in your product, your produce, your actual organisms that you're harvesting are typically larger. And cities are perceived as being dirty, polluted, where residents suffer, lack wildlife, plant life, and are artificial. And of course, in many cases, that is the fact. Sacramento is obviously an exception. We do have some wildlife and plant life and are a little less artificial than some other cities. All right, random questions. Here we go. Match them up. Clean Air Act, Water Quality Act, RCRA, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, Safe Drinking Water Act. What years were those acts? I'm going to give you guys a little bit longer as this is a 4-part question. All right, here we go. All right, so the Clean Air Act was 1970. The Water Quality Act was 1987. Resource Conservation and Recovery Act was 1976. And the Safe Drinking Water Act was 1974. Removing river water for irrigation of cropland will most likely result in the increase of blank in a downstream estuary. Remember, an estuary is a location where salt water and fresh water mix, typically at the opening of a river into a bay that is adjacent to the ocean or directly emptying a river into the ocean. True or false? Oven cleaner, radioactive waste, used motor oil, mining waste are all considered to be hazardous. All right, here we go. Removing river water for irrigation of cropland will most likely result in the increase of salinity because there would still be the same amount of salt water, but there would be less fresh water to mix with it. And false. Radioactive equals high level hazardous waste. All of the others would be considered hazardous waste. True or false? Removing larger trees so that the smaller ones will have adequate light is a reason for a prescribed burn. Erosion and desertification are two major effects of blank. The shrinking of the blank blank has been linked to increased maternal and infant mortality rates, an increase in respiratory disease, increased diarrheal diseases, and an increase in both hepatitis and tuberculosis. And this is a geographic location. A couple more seconds. All right, here we go. False. Removing larger trees so that the smaller ones will have adequate light is not a reason for a prescribed burn. Typically, prescribed burns are to remove the litter and the shrub species from the forest floor. So, in the event that you have a lightning strike or an accidental fire starts, the fire can't get out of control quite as much. Oh my goodness. All right, sorry about that. Erosion and desertification are two major effects of overgrazing. So again, today's warm-up question talked about rotational grazing, so you don't actually dig the roots out of the ground, or the cows or grazers don't. And shrinking of the Aral Sea has been linked to all of those problems in the residents near it. All right, here we go. Last questions. Which layer or layers is or are leaching in soil most likely to occur? So the actual layer in the soil profile. True or false? Cities are self-contained. One of the most effective methods of reducing landfill volume is to promote the use of blank containers for consumer goods. An e-waste management idea that has the fewest negative environmental and social consequences is collection by blank to take back their blanks for recycling. And some of these are obscure questions, I know. All right, here we go. The answers to the last questions. It's the layer directly below the surface where leaching is most likely to occur. False cities are not self-contained. One of the most effective methods of reducing landfill volume is to promote the use of reusable containers for consumer goods. An e-waste management idea that has the fewest negative environmental and social consequences is collection by the manufacturers themselves or the producers to take back their products for recycling. And again, that is another example of if they're producing, let's just say, a computer, they're going to need the raw materials from that computer. And once the computer has no more use, send it back to the producer so they can recycle that stuff and it can make their product a little less expensive. All right, you guys, that is it for the questions. It's going to take me a couple hours to get this uploaded to YouTube and then back into the classroom. Thanks for spending some of your personal time to get ready for the exams, and we will see you guys tomorrow or Friday.